Would you please give Steve a big round of applause?
Good.
I'm just going to reiterate this. I know I've mentioned it in the past. I put it in the newsletter, actually twice. But Steve is the only guy I ever met that was a double ace. He had 10 victories. You only need 5 to be an ace. Wow. And not only that, but he was shot down over in France. And instead of getting, he did get found by the French resistance. And instead of hiding with them until he can be transported back to England, he decided to stay with him for 6 months. And he stayed with him until Paris was liberated. He actually worked with the underground and the OSS. So that's pretty amazing. And I kind of was, I'd like to hear more about that. So I'll get out of the way. And
okay. Ladies, gentlemen, a pleasure indeed to be here, and I'm extremely happy to have the opportunity to tell you about my life story. I'm going to cut the details, of course, and talk to you about the actual events I was involved while in the Air Force, while with the French resistance in occupied Paris, where I spent 6 months with them, and my life story, spending 30 years in the U.S. Air Force. Let me then begin from the very beginning and tell you about my life story. I was born in Athens, Greece, in a family of 6 siblings, 5 boys and a girl. Always I wanted to really become an aviator because one time a biplane of the Greek Air Force flew overhead in my neighborhood there, southwest part of Athens, where I was born, and it began to do the most astonishing acrobatics I have ever seen. And I said to myself, someday I'm going to become an aviator. Of course, I was not successful to join the Greek Air Force Academy. I wasn't a good student, evidently, and I decided to just let that go and head for America. I had learned about America from the movies, especially Western movies. Buck Jones, Tom Mix, George O'Brien, all those guys. And of course, I didn't have anybody here to invite me, so I decided to join the Greek Merchant Marine. And that's how I really was able to travel all over the world. The first travel I was involved in was in South America, Buenos Aires. I was an assistant fireman on a 10,000-ton freighter. And the first journey we had, we went down to Buenos Aires and then we came back to Greece. Then the second job I had was on a 10,000-ton freighter that was departing Greece to go to Baltimore. I didn't know where Baltimore was. I said, I want to go to America. Anyway, we crossed the Atlantic Ocean. That was mean that time. I remember, I got seasick and I wish I had never really, going to sea, but we made it. Arrived in Baltimore, and that's when I jumped ship, what they call it. But I didn't know where on earth to go. So one of the crew members, said to me one day, he said, Steve, you wouldn't want to stay at sea. He said, he said, you better just stay in this country. I wish I had done that long ago, but I didn't. But he said, it's wonderful country and you can do anything here. You meet many Greeks and what have you. So I jumped ship in Baltimore, got the train, arrived in New York, and I didn't know what on earth to do or where to go. And all of a sudden I remember I was coming down on 8th Avenue, and as I was walking, I spotted the Greek and the American flags next to each other. Oh my God, I said, the Greek flag. Something must be going on. So I crossed the avenue, 8th Avenue. I almost hit by a car. I didn't know anything about traffic. And it was a movie house that was playing the first movie ever made in Greece, The Shepherd's Daughter, Voskopula in Greek. Oh my God, I said, I saw this in Athens. And all of a sudden, two gentlemen, a young fellow and an elder fellow, stopped behind me and they began to talk in Greek. One of them said, what do they know in Greece about making movies? Movies are made in America. So the other guy said, well, let's go in, and if we don't like it, we can always come out. This was conversation in Greek, which I understood, and they were just behind me. I said, excuse me, I said, but what is it you want to know about this movie? I saw this movie in Athens. So the elder fellow said, in Athens? And what are you doing here? Looks like, you know, you have come out from a boat or something. I said, I did. So I explained to him exactly. He said, and where are you going? I said, I don't know. I said, probably find a park, you know, and sleep for a night or so. No, he says, you know, you come with us. He's my brother, he said. We live in Brooklyn. So they took me to their home in Brooklyn. And then finally, he knew someone at an employment agency, and he found me a job about 2 weeks later at a Greek restaurant and bakery on 147th Street and Broadway. So I had to commute for a while. He told me how to get the subway and everything between 147th Street and Brooklyn. Later on, of course, I moved nearby the place where I was working. And so then I said, I want to see airplanes. Where do we want? I asked one of the boys. Where do we go here to see airplanes? Oh, he says, we have Floyd Bennett Field here. And next week, when we have the day off, we were having the day off at the same time. He says, I'll take you down there. So my God, he took me to Brooklyn, Floyd Bennett Field. I learned exactly what things were going on. And I inquire about it, and the guy says, well, you can learn, but he said, I charge $12 an hour and $8 when you solo. I got the first money I made, honest to God, I really invested on flying. So I began to fly at Floyd Bennett Field and accumulated quite a few hours. Later on, of course, I moved to New Jersey because I found a better job there and a better pay. And I kept on flying from Westville Airport. In the meantime, I was able to obtain my private pilot's license, and I was flying by myself. Then when the war started in Europe and the Italians invaded the place of my birth, I was so goddamn mad. And I was mad at the Italians and everybody. And I went to fly, I remember that day, and my instructor noticed that I was kind of upset. He said, Steve, he said, what's going on? Oh, I said, the doggone Italians, so and so and so. I said, boy, I wanted to fight them. You really want to fight them? Well, yes. He said, I tried to join the army, I told the guy, but they wouldn't take me because I was not an American. He said, how would you like to join the Royal Air Force? The RAF is in this country right now securing American pilots without any publicity because J. Edgar Hoover didn't like the idea and he told FDR about it. You can't do that, you know. He says, how would you like to join the RAF? And I said, but who would join the RAF where? I can't go to England. Oh, he says, no, here. At the Waldorf Astoria on the 13th floor, they have an office. The sign outside the door reads, Clayton Night Committee. My God. I was in New Jersey, of course, working at the Park Hotel at the time. I caught the train on my day off, went to New York, located at Waldorf Astoria, 13th floor, and I walked all over the place. Finally, I came to the sign, Clayton Night Committee. That was the office that was actually recruiting American aviators, you know, to go fly for the Royal Air Force. Oh God, I knocked the door, a lady says, come in. I walked in and I told her what I wanted to. Oh, she said, just a moment. She went to another office and then she waved at me to come over. I went over and she introduced me to Squadron Leader George Graves. the RAF representative in America that was recruiting American aviators. So I told him exactly what I was looking for, and the man looked at my license. I had my private pilot's license by the time, by the way. And he says, okay. He says, he called the secretary to his office and said, help Mr. Pisanos to complete an application. I completed the application. I said, well. So I went back to my work. About a month later, I got a telephone call from Squadron Leader Graves. He said, Mr. Pisanos, you have been accepted to join the Royal Air Force. When can you come to New York to go through a physical and other examinations? I said, I'll be up there next week on my day off. I went there, visited the following week, and they looked at me and examined me, and in fact I think they contacted the Greek embassy to find out who on earth I was, since I was really interested in joining the RAF. Anyway, I made the application, completed the papers, and about a month later I got another telephone call. Mr. Pisanos, you have been selected to attend Polaris Flight Academy in Glendale, California. Oh my God, I said. So I had to tell now my German boss at the Park Hotel where I was working that I was going to leave the hotel and go to Europe to fight Germany. Although he was a German fellow, you know, he didn't care about Hitler and anybody else. He gave him his blessing, and of course I left. And I went to Polaris Flight Academy. I received some 90 flying hours. At that time, without any publicity, the school was using Air Force, US Air Force military aircraft like the PT-13, the BT-13, which I flew, and that's where I got my education, at Polaris Flight Academy. Then open graduation, I was sent to England. In England, I had joined a different squadron from the one that I ended up with. It was the 268 Fighter Squadron flying P-51 Mustangs over Holland. And the mission was to strafe military trains that carry German soldiers. I knocked a couple locomotives on that mission, but then later on, through the American Eagle Squadron in London, I met Chesley Peterson, who was commander of the 71 American Eagle Squadron. That was a group of Americans who had volunteered to fly for the RAF before the US got into the war. Well, Chesley Peterson, he says, what are you flying, the Mustang? I said, yes, sir. He said, how would you like to come and join the 71 Eagle Squadron? Oh, but I don't know if the authorities really approve that. Oh, he says, I know the authorities, I'll take care. And anyway, so I transferred to the 71 Eagle Squadron. At that time, of course, we were flying Spitfires, and then the decision in Washington was made to re-equip us with P-47s. So we started to fly the P-47s, and it was at that time, by the way, when I was contacted by the embassy in London, telling me that there was a special representative from Washington who was going to naturalize Americans who were not Americans but were flying with the American military. And my God, I went to London, and sure thing, I was naturalized in London, England on the 3rd of May 1943. It happened to be the first individual ever to become a US citizen outside the continental limits. In fact, Walter Cronkite, who introduced my book, by the way, has the comment in here, how I became an American. Anyway, I stayed with the 4th Fighter Group, flying. Later on, we got P-51s, by the way, and we were able to fly escorting B-17s to Berlin. I took part on the first Berlin escort mission. the Luftwaffe was all over the place. Of course, they never expected that the Americans would be able to send the B-17s to Berlin and escorted by fighters. But my God, we did. And my group, by the way, was the only group that flew from England to Berlin, then to Russia. And from Russia, they came down to Italy, and from Italy back to... Of course, I wasn't with them at that mission because I had already gone down. Oh, let me go back to my last mission there. After about 106 combat missions, I had escorting Spitfires, P-47s, and P-51s. I was on a close escort mission down to Bordeaux, France. I took a bunch of B-17s. They were going to bomb aerodromes the Luftwaffe was using to send bombers in the Atlantic Ocean, over the Atlantic Ocean, to bomb convoys bringing goods to England. Anyway, we escorted the B-17s down there, and I got into a fight, and I shot down 3 of those buggers. And on the way back, though, I had problems. The P-51s we were using, they sent over to England, did not have the American spark plugs for the Rolls-Royce built engine. And they began to use substitute spark plugs. And of course, after about 7, 8 hours or 10 hours, you know, the engine would file up, and depends where you were. And so that's what happened. On the way back home to England, I had been separated from my friends. I lost my engines about 20 kilometers south of Le Havre. I crash landed there, and I tried to bail out, and of course the rule was do not bail out in high altitude because the Germans were going to practice on you. So we avoided doing that, and I remember, you know, I released my canopy, I unbuckled everything, and I was ready to step out in the aircraft when I crash landed. And I was outside the wing, by the way, when that happened. I crash landed, and thank God that the right wing dropped down, and the aircraft skidded a little bit to the right, and I was thrown to the left, just barely missing the propeller. How I survived, I have no idea, but I made it. When I came out, I looked at the sky, and my God, I thank God, you know, for saving my life. But at that time, while I was trying to put fire on the aircraft, 2 German soldiers arrived, and evidently they spotted what I was planning to do, and they began to fire their weapons. Well, I was just about ready, you know, to get matches, and we were carrying matches up there with us. And all of a sudden, bullets, you know, came over my head, and that scared the heck out of me. I said, to heck with that. I dropped everything right there, and I began to run, and the goddamn Germans were firing at me, and I remember to this day the bullets, you know, either to the left or to the right. And then later on, when I came back to England and briefed the intelligence people, I said, wait a minute, you said they were firing at you, and he says evidently they were not good marksmen, because if they wanted to get you, they should have really gone this way. Instead, you know, they were aiming and probably didn't have a good eyesight. Anyway, so I came back to England, after I was liberated in France. But in France, I spent 6 months after my crash landing, and I got away from the Germans who were chasing me. And 5 days later, I made contact with a French family. In high school in Athens, Greece, the mandatory foreign language was French. But I never really went after French. I said, I'm going to America. They speak English there, you know. And so anyway, the French began to really come to mind there. And so when I made contact with the resistance, they decided to take me to Paris. So they moved me to Paris, and you won't believe this here, while we were going to Paris on a truck that was carrying firewood to the people in Paris. I was inside the cabin there between the driver and another guy who spoke a little English, and the Germans were going back and forth, and of course I felt that, you know, maybe one of those guys will stop. I want to examine your papers and so on. But no one stopped us. So we went to Paris, and I spent 6 months with the French resistance. And we did some killing, and especially blowing up trains that had carrying soldiers, German soldiers. Just to give you an idea, the French decorated me with the French Croix de Guerre, and about 2 years ago, I got a letter from the French ambassador in Washington. Dear Colonel Pisanos, the government in Paris discovered that you contributed immensely for our liberation, and they have awarded you the Legion of Honor, the French highest decoration. They wanted me to go to Washington to receive that. No, to go to France to receive it, and I told them I couldn't do it. So they came here and they presented me the decoration at the San Diego Aerospace Museum. Anyway, I spent some 30 years in the American Air Force. I was assigned to Colorado Springs. I was assigned to the Pentagon. I spent close to a year in Vietnam. I didn't go to Korea, but when I was at the Pentagon, I was in charge of taking P-51s from the Air National Guard, sending them to Korea. That was my job there. I spent some 30 years in the Air Force, the most wonderful service I have ever had. I met a lot of people. I received quite a few decorations, and to this day, honest to God, I really appreciate and love this great country of ours. And I'll never forget that little black fellow on television not too long ago when he was explaining something and he said, "God damn America." I got so mad, I told my wife, I'm going to go to, this was in Chicago, I'm going to go to Chicago, assassinate him, and then check in with the FBI. So, saying those words, about my adopted country. Anyway, I had the opportunity, by the way, to write this wonderful book here, The Flying Greek. Telly Savalas, before he passed away, looked at the book and he said, "We're going to make a movie out of it." And then, of course, he passed away, and I lost his support there. But Tom Hanks, who visited the Aerospace Museum here in San Diego, I met him, and the director there gave him a copy, and he looked at it. And my God, about a month later, he came back to the museum and says, "Wonderful story," he said. But he didn't say, we're going to try to. It was Telly Savalas, who really wanted to make movie out of this story. Anyway, I just want to say to you that this country is the greatest and the most wonderful country in the world. I love it. And if there is another war, my God, I'll volunteer. Even so, I'm 96 years old, and I've been in 3 wars. But if there is anything that will really disturb or bother this wonderful country, I'll be up in the front there to defend America. Because America is the greatest country on earth. Thank you very much for listening to my message.
We really appreciate you coming and sharing your story today, Steve. It was wonderful. I laughed and I cried, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, as I'm sure everyone else did. So we want to award this certificate of appreciation from the Military Order of the World Wars. And it says, presented to Colonel Steve Pisanos, the companions and guests of the General J.P. Holland chapter sincerely thank you for sharing the incredible story of your journey from Greece to the United States as an extraordinary aviator and ace with 10 victories. We were most intrigued by your adventures with the French underground and service with the OSS. We wish you the very best in your future endeavors. Signed by Nicholas Herpka, Chapter Commander.
Thank you very, very much. I will frame this among my other collection.
Carl Swepston is a retired Navy SEAL from Vietnam era, and I know that if we asked him to, he'd tell us some of his stories. You talk about being in the thick of it, he was. But something that's special about Carl, for us in particular, is that he made a challenge going for our chapter. even though National makes its own. And we're about ready to order more. The first 100, you know, we got about a dozen left in the box. But this is one way that we let people know about the military order of world wars, but also the Holland chapter. So since he's the man that designs this coin, he's the man that presents it, and you know,
Oh my God.
before you do that though, you gotta do it all over again. We got stages.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
All right, we gotta get a photo.
Okay.
If the photo's not there,
Okay. I got it in my hand.
all right.
You heard Nick talk a little bit earlier in the day about the Quilts of Valor organization. And I've had the distinct pleasure and the blessing of being associated with that organization for about 5 years now. And I've made over 100 presentations to veterans and others who have been touched by war. Anywhere that this happens, it's an expression of appreciation for the service and the valor of veterans who were touched by war. To date, as of yesterday, the total number of quilts that have been presented by the Quilts of Valor organization is 135,000.
Wonderful. Wow.
We have chapters of this organization all over the United States. There are 2 of them here in North County. And my wife, Kay, belongs to both of those. And she spends most of her daylight hours in her quilt studio upstairs putting together Quilts of Valor. And we have one of Kay's quilts to present to you today in honor of your service and express our appreciation.
Thank you.
So it's not often that we get to have the quilter present to make the presentation. But if we can find it, we'll bring it up and take a picture.
Don will help you with that. Or anybody else.
Here's another folder with some
Oh my
stuff in
God.
it you can take
Okay.
along and tells the story.
Okay. Oh my God.
That is good.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh.
That is gorgeous.
Oh. Wonderful.
And there's a label on the back that has the names of Kay's name as the quilter, and as she made the top, pieced it together, and then another one of the ladies in the group does the quilting. This is for you, Steve. Enjoy it.
Thank you
Wear
very,
it
very
when
much.
if you're
I
ever
will.
inclined to relax a little bit and sit down and take a nap. Do it under this quilt.
Okay, I will.
Can you tell these good people how many people came out of the woodwork in Paris and they freed you?
Oh, but,
You were not the only one, there was lots.
Oh, no, quite a few. Especially B-17 pilots who had to bail out over France, and the resistance, decided to gather everybody in Paris instead of scatter them all over the place. So when Paris was liberated, close to more than 1,000 came out from hiding.
Wow.
I was one of them. Yeah, that was really wonderful. But after the war, I visited Paris, and I located the buildings where I was staying, but the people were different people. They were not there, of course. Some of them had passed away, but it was really wonderful the way France took care of us, during the war. And anyway, I want to thank you again for being so wonderful people, to have my friend RG and myself here today. I enjoyed it, and this will stay with me forever. Thank you much.